Alright, so let's talk about sanding. The sander, you don't need anything heavily crazy. If you have even a dual action polisher, you can utilize that. The dual action is going to be able to give you a quicker job and a cleaner finish on it. If you have just an orbital one, kind of like this, that's perfectly fine as well. Just obviously keep in a very linear pattern, one direction is my recommendation. This one costs about 20-30 bucks. You can get it at Harbor Freight. Same thing, these particular sandpapers, you can get them at Harbor Freight as well. You'll end up seeing we have the standard version of the Bauer, and then we have the Hercules variation. So the overall performance and design of these particular brands, now you can buy really cheap um, sandpaper and everything, or disc, whatever you wish to referring to it as, but I wouldn't end up recommending that because it's going to burn out real quick. The material is very thin inside itself, and the amount of aggregate that they put on it is minimal, and the amount of adhesive that they use to bind the aggregate is typically poor, and as well the backing that it ends up adhering onto the buffer or sander, kind of like this. So here I have pretty much 4 different options, maybe 5. So from least expensive up is between the Bauer and the Scotch Bright pad. This one's 360 grit. That's kind of the minimum, but they do end up categorizing it, or at least not on this packaging, but they do categorize it as a fine scuffing pretty much before paint. So, and as you see, they say primer. So that kind of brings me back to the 320 grit scratches that are utilizing these Diablo sanding discs. They work great, but if you're leaving the base coat on there, if you have a good substrate and you don't have to do any priming on the vehicle, then you can kind of get away with using a higher grit than that. Typically in the industry, you don't want to go past 800 because adhesion properties on it. So these ones are actually pretty fair. I think these ones run about maybe 10 bucks or so. And then I think these Hercules were a couple bucks more, maybe around $14. The 3 pads of the Scotch Bright, you see they're 6" by 9. Ended up running, I think, about $6 or $8. And then these 10 Diablo disc, which it did have a backing to it. It's not a interface backing like this that has a heavy, thick foam, but it is a sub-minimal layer, as you can kind of see, to help adhere between the buffer and whatever aggregate you're going to end up using. So if you're going to be buffing a whole car, I would highly suggest end up getting these Diablo pads for obvious reason. They don't clog up. Um, you can blow them out real quick and easy, and they do last longer. It states 10 times the life, and I'd probably say that's just about right. If you've ever sanded anything before, you'll end up noticing the actual material ends up getting clogged up, and then no longer you have a layer of whatever you're sanding that is sitting on top of this and embedded. It's kind of almost adheres itself with the heat and the friction and whatnot. So the next thing that I'm going to end up mentioning here, this one is a zirconia grain, which I don't know if you guys know about the little earrings that people buy for 10 bucks and everything that has diamonds in it. So that's cubic zirconium. So it's real similar to this. It has a lot of similar characteristics to diamonds, but obviously is not anywhere near as expensive or as abrasive or hard as real diamonds are. This one is a ceramic based one. Again, ceramic is very hard, which is able to kind of endure a little bit more beating and bruising. But I would probably honestly go with the zirconia one over the ceramic, because the ceramic, it has a finer finish on it and it will last longer. So that's what's kind of going to be coming down to. How long do you want the pad to last? What's the finish quality that you're looking for out of it? And what's kind of your price range for it? Again, like most things, if you try to cheap out, you're going to spend more in the end because you're having to buy more. So if you're just trying to knock a car down and get it ready for primer, this would be perfect. If you're trying to do something like this where you're leaving the base coat and you're trying to get a good finish, something like the ceramic would be better. It's less coarse, more fine. The Diablos, I can't remember which these ones use. It's a ceramic blend. So this one, again, is higher quality, kind of like the Hercules here. Um, but this will give you a better finish. You can run through the whole car real quick. It's easy to clean these out, but these won't get clogged up as easy, especially if you're using a sander that has either a vacuum attachment or a dust collection container on it, which I'm really glad this has it, especially for the price. The next thing that you kind of end up getting into if you're doing engine bays or real tough areas is kind of some of these abrasive balls. These are great for those particular areas, wheel wells and whatnot as well, and undercarriages. 400 grit for this one is perfectly fine. It'll be able to give us the kind of the overall texture and consistency that we need and finish. And then I said the Scotch Bright. This, in my opinion, is probably the best bet, at least bang for the buck. Um, I don't know. In my opinion, I'd either go between one of these two. I like the finish that this does. It doesn't leave heavy scratches, and it knocks it down pretty quick, and you can also blow this out pretty easy versus a paper disc where, again, you have a flat piece of material. I don't know. It's kind of like, I don't know, this piece of paper here and everything. There's a layer of coating over top of it. So the same thing forms, but happens with all this. So, sorry, this is probably too long of a video, but I just wanted to go over those things. Recap, if you're going down to bare metal, hit it with 80 grit. If you're just going to prime and fill, you can start with a 320, and or if you want, you can go up higher, maybe to a 600, and utilize some of these Diablos, and you can knock through the whole car pretty quick. I would highly recommend utilizing like an interface pad, especially if you have newer vehicles where there's a lot of contours on the areas. You don't want to have any flat spots, especially if you had to fill any of the areas with Bondo or anything like that, for minor defects. So, and then you may end up needing some small bits and pieces here and there. Lowe's has really good Dremel bits. They're real thin, kind of like this, and have like a diamond tip on them. I think they're about like $10. They are a little bit expensive, but it works really good. If you have rust in particular areas that are real tight, you can go through there and clean them up with either a die grind or a Dremel, a drill, or whatever you have on hand. So that's going to we covered preparation, we covered sanding. Let's go to the next thing. So one thing I am going to mention about sanding, you may end up asking, okay, what type of finish, how much of this are we trying to take off? We're more or less just trying to get a matte surface on it. We don't want to sit here for a minute just on one particular area. We want to move throughout this panel, which I'll show you actually here in just a second because that's going to be easier.